So the greatest plan in all of history, okay? You want to start by having this strategy, this complex strategy for what government can be. And you want to then try to promote the interrelated world history that got us here. And especially if you can promote one of these key areas in the Middle East that we've had these standoffs with ever since World War II with Israel and the creation of Israel, and the fact that there's so much legacy, some of the most amazing legacy in all of human history, the creation of certain religions or the understanding and realization of certain religions, and how they maybe we're supposed to bring this all together now in this important way where we talk about the strengths of everyone and how we've been working to build this set of concepts that allow us to be this strong family. And there are so many things that you can try to promote if you appreciate all of the different cultures that have added to the human story. And so that's the logo, the vision, the mission. It's interesting that with my burns, I have a pattern on my back that if it was colored, if I got a tattoo, I could make it look a lot like Damascus steel. Kind of, in some ways. But it'd be a tricky effect in some ways. But anyway, the point is that open source, having this open source mesh, that's the other key thing. We can build this strategy where we talk about, because open source at key levels protects the free market. And if we're going to have a safe, advanced AI age, or what does a Martian government look like? You're going to be managing all these AI technologies. You're going to be very worried about this interconnected mesh that powers your advanced grids of the future and the ways those could be utilized together to create dangerous things, targeting algorithms or algorithms that mess with employment opportunities based upon identities, all kinds of things that could potentially be messed with. And if we have this strategy where now other systems, there are other layers that can possibly be built on top of these that might have some vulnerabilities, but if we protect these key layers, we protect the free market. Now I know that sounds complex to some people, but imagine Target and Walmart and Amazon not wanting to work together on an overall system that allows purchases everywhere to have one universal product coding system. Now, maybe they're best positioned, realistically, to build these advanced accounting features. Because if you want these advanced accounting features, you're going to need to know product level details. And then you can do really advanced things with finance and accounting and different AI. AI is a big term, but computer systems that are optimized to route your transactions into proper accounting protocols, such that it's easy for you to manage your finance for your business. This is something that's so important to me, that you get companies to work together and you have a strategy for how others can build products on top of these meshes. Because Amazon and Target and Walmart, or the other big companies that can build these that are maintaining these warehouse management systems, if they want to lock that down and not allow other people to build products on top of that, then we've gotten to a point where companies, because of the things that they're involved in, can control the success of others, even though they're not thinking about the things the others are thinking about. The others approach them and they're like, oh, we're going to try to make as much money off of your idea as we possibly can, because we just happen to be positioned this way. And we need to get to a point where we talk about how we're building a mesh that powers society in a way where we protect the free market. Because if businesses can do these things where they extort these key layers of society that are very important and they empower so many things, then we're not talking about how to build a government of the people that's protecting the free market and the access to the opportunity. Now, I have a model where it's complex, but we can do that. We can talk about positioning different architectures and different core managed systems, and then we weight who has the control in those. Now, in something like UPC, because that powers inventory management systems and accounting products, you need addendums that are defined for who controls that market in a diverse way. That partly it's going to be based upon who's driving the significant advances in warehouse management systems and the teams that are driving that. And there's also going to be the teams that are driving the advanced accounting features. And so you have to have an addendums definition that puts both of those groups in power over that infrastructure in a very equal way, because they're products that depend on one another, but they're not related, or they're very different verticals. And so you look at this and you can realize that, for example, if you work together, if all these companies that are your Amazon and your Target and your Walmart, and you have customers and you have buyers that are purchasing things from suppliers, and if you can realize that there's a way to build a continuous improvement loop into the products that you're selling that allow the public to interact with all of these different suppliers to propose product improvements or more advanced ways than just leaving reviews. Okay, there are probably ways you can use natural language parsing to see the most common things referenced in reviews, but a more organized way of doing that actually empowers the person who is talking about potentially building a different solution to do so in a more elaborate way is to build these continuous improvement ecosystems and allow there to be different contractors that fill those continuous improvement needs. That's also an extension of the universal product coding system. Because if I have ideas for how to make specific products better, you can open up this continual improvement philosophy. It will probably reduce the cost of developing beta products for the marketplace, because you'll be able to release something to the marketplace sooner and sell it while you're getting some beta feedback. Now, companies do that in a more micromanaged way right now, which is probably more expensive than if we work on a set of infrastructures like I propose. Because you can get these tools very, very sophisticated. I mean, you can get down to analyzing the materials science involved and how you can offset different environmental concerns by cycling through different materials trends. That, if you think about it, do you know how people say there are trends in fashion? Well, there can be trends in design as well. In fact, if we steer it that way, we can open up problems and say, well, we have these environmental constraints now, and we're releasing these things into the atmosphere, and maybe we should cycle to something else so that those things can dissipate, or we can, hopefully maybe you can find a more advanced way. And you can kind of steer that in ways where people can kind of reinvent the wheel and we can go through design trends. And then again, you've got more class mobility overall in society for people to have different ideas and contribute to different things and solve different problems. That's part of the human condition. Getting this far, there are people out there who need to be able to solve problems. Otherwise, they feel like they're not doing something productive with their life. They're not really trying to contribute to society. There are people who that means so much to, that this is the ultimate way of operating. And we would rather empower that set of leadership than to empower the people who just want more of a socialist government where it's more about who people like and their feelings, rather than who's actually got the best strategies, and having teams who understand the complexities in the data and the production, trying to pick other people who seem like they have great ideas for how to pivot production, or pivot materials trends, or pivot technological approaches to uncover new opportunities or cost savings opportunities or environmental benefits, which are all things that our society needs to think about. And so if you understand this open source extension, I clashed with an individual named Dan at Target because he was like, you're trying to take open source and make it all under a political umbrella. You're trying to take government of the people and put the businesses and the profits in charge of how we make our budget decisions. And I said, no, that the government still controls its huge tax system. There's just another tax system that only seeks to make maybe 80 billion profit, you want it to be more than that because you want to build this up to the point where, and we've got 30 years to do this, I propose, but either the government can hold on to these shares if we determine that that's the best idea, or we can have a private sector board own these shares, and then it just becomes, how do you best define how the companies have control over this organization, and do you just build it that the public can invest in this to protect this, and then they're basically going to go promote the platform and live their lives talking about the importance of this platform because that'll affect the amount of profit they make off of the dividends. And then you basically have this employee-owned philosophy trying to drive a bigger government of the people, but you've now built it in a very complex, different way, which allows you to pay off the national debt, be a stronger team, and America can truly talk about how open source at these key levels, not everything, but at key levels, it protects the concept of the free market, and in these key levels that define how we govern our society with finance, with mental health, because again, if mental health is relevant in gun control, it's a difficult subject that we haven't really approached yet. Because again, we would have to talk about this open source mesh and how we're building this grid together as a society, the government and the businesses, the levers the government wants to be able to have to control things or pull things to optimize the economy, or in this case, how they can control flags and alert systems for people that they don't think should have their guns temporarily taken away, or all of these different things. And then it just becomes difficult to know, how do you know when you can sell these guns, or do you sell the guns? Do you force them to sell the guns? Do you hold them onto a period of time and then deem that they're safe? What do you do? What's the best thing to handle there? And you have to talk about a mesh that the government co-manages alongside a private sector that contracts to build these solutions. And now you've got this very, very sophisticated approach to how we build infrastructure and how we monetize the rewards around it, such that we can actually drive the value of the American system on the world stage. And we can talk about this interconnected mesh that allows us to scout for, and the bid system is part of that, but it's an interconnected mesh that allows us to scout for better solutions. And if you really care about open source and you think that it's important, you would enshrine it constitutionally in these key levels. And I don't think that it should be just donation driven, because I can talk about how individuals and businesses can support these projects. However, this model can be difficult to make sustainable. And so let's make sure that these key open source levels are well funded, and that there are people who know that these are some of the most important jobs in our economy, because that's how we manage our compartmentalization of security. It's how we protect ourselves from how these different AI platforms could be connected or utilized in conjunction, and we sort of screen that to the best of our ability. And we need interconnected repositories to build automatic screening tools and the code analysis, and those are some of the most brilliant people in the world that are going to be able to do that. That's language analysis and the cutting edge of all things computer science. That's an arena that's beyond me. I do think a little bit. I understand how natural language parsing and functions are basically what you're doing. You're parsing things with functions and you're breaking that apart into code from text. And so I understand how languages are built, but that I know that I don't have, that would take me the rest of my life to figure out how to really build that part of it. I'm very confident that requires so much studying. Understanding that we can connect these modeling platforms, and there are tables of data that can power these modeling tools for both psychology and education journeys. And how you can make these, you can highlight cognitive constructs and port that into these 3D graphics technologies. That I think I can wrap my head around, and that's what's most interesting to me. I do think that the language building, that's more complex, and to build these analysis engines, I don't know if I can do that. I'm pretty confident that I can build the modeling piece if I get the opportunity to work on those pieces. That's what seems most interesting to me, because I also like video games, and I wouldn't mind getting later on into my career and working on some different video game projects. I would like that. That's how I would like to grow. And so, this is basically, I'm reading this RudderStack and how they've got this customer data platform. And I wonder if they're trying to do something similar to what I'm talking about, with making it easier to collaborate on open source, making it so that it's not so jargon intensive, such that you can have ideas for how to help steer open source, even if you're not a developer, even if you don't have the skill to write the code. But you can conceptually talk about the way the code can be utilized to drive different things, or to, how the code can be built such that it's managed a specific way, or it has specific security benefits or loopholes. If you can understand those things, then you can be a part of that conversation. And you don't necessarily have to understand how to code exactly what you're talking about. You just have to understand how coding works in a high enough level that you can engage with that conversation. And we can make tools to make engaging with open source strategy more accessible by making it less jargon intensive and building this pitch system that I'm talking about and I'm trying to sell the world on is the most important opportunity we have. Because then, yes, you talk about the bids that we have in government, you can manage open source through this, you can talk about research to cure cancer or paralysis or different conditions or advanced prosthetics, all kinds of different things that work on sort of nervous system interface, a nervous system interface or nerve interface, brain nerve interface. Well, I've heard some different things that to talk about that term and how that technology, what that technology would really be called. You know, being able to sense, I've heard people talk about maybe wearing a hat with EEG scanners, and maybe those things can tell when somebody is trying to move their hand. Maybe you have to get people in these systems very soon after their injury, otherwise those connections in the brain will weaken and you won't be able to detect that electrical activity that's trying to make the hand move. And if you don't have the coordination and be able to see it happening, maybe you can't refine those loops to get the finesse and the dexterity if you don't get that system installed soon enough. Maybe through certain stem cell research, we can cure injuries, permanent injuries, what are considered permanent injuries right now, but it would require us to administer those cures within, you know, a few hours after the injury. And then we could help that person. But these are very complex things. And so you could excite people. And here's the other part of it. When people go through these difficult experiences, for me, it was trying to understand the psychology. And that's what I wanted to chase after when I was at different ages, but especially in high school. But I couldn't, it was a very vague set of things to try to approach. And you're not getting real world exposure to what the career would be like when you're in high school, but that's when you're making the decisions about what you want to do with the rest of your life, unless, you know, more people go to school when they're 25 to 30, which I think is one of the better plans because you can develop some interest in, but that might not happen until you're 30 too. And so how do you best build the world for the inspiration that can happen in life? And I argue that it's with strategic pivot. You have more role model exposure, more people will get to see what it's like as more people collaborate on key ideas. You'll have more cross-pollination of ideas, more cross-exposure to different skill sets, and as a result, you will certainly have a stronger society. Arguably, there's no better way to drive industrial policy than through the things that I'm talking about, because you can set goals, and you can have this, and this is one of the things that I clashed with Dan on also. I'm not saying that this Fortune 500 board manages like half of our national budget. I'm saying get them to be in a position where they can pay down chunks of the national debt, because that's going to safeguard the private sector anyway in this country. It's to their advantage to do so. Realistically, we've been taking some money to pay for different things, and some of those were military expenses, some of those were investments and to try to stimulate economic growth in different areas. I know Elon Musk paid back his loans. I'm not sure how all those business deals work, but we can get the same thing as giving a loan, really, because company can buy back its stock if it wants to. And so you can imagine people building this system where through this advanced tax system, we have the government and the private sector both dumping, maybe it's only $40 billion each a year. Maybe they each do $80 billion and then every single US citizen gets to invest $400 that year. Maybe we don't have that amount be that big every year. We have it fluctuate a little bit, but we try to keep it between $200 and $500. That way, people are boosting their retirement. You incentivize this thinking very deeply about the things we're building in our society and how we're positioning ourselves for success. And you're also thinking about skills that will make you stronger contributors to those endeavors. Best thing to do for industrial policy. And you're also offsetting retirement costs by allowing people to invest in the stock market through this streamlined project management system. And then we're able to scout as well which citizens have better ideas or which companies have better ideas that citizens are most supportive of. And we can field all of that through building a tax system where citizens can invest some money in different initiatives. And it doesn't have to be all of the budget. This is all that I'm talking about is they are trying to make payments on the national debt. If if our government doesn't do a good job of managing its costs, or we need an economic bailout, they would be positioned to do that. And so again, they're like this bank that's saying, hey, you know what? If it's these circumstances, we'd be willing to bail you out. If we can see a benefit to the private sector, but we're going to work with you on that so that it stays within reason. And I don't think that that's wrong. I think that that offsets just the kind of blindly driving for wishes that society could be better and dumping all kinds of money into a loose strategy that isn't clearly defined, and we're just dumping money into people that aren't trying very hard to solve these problems. And I think that's part of the reason why our costs have gone up. They want to solve the problem so that they look good rather than actually doing the best they can at solving the problem. And so it doesn't mean as much to them. And we want to find the people who this means an insane amount to, really. And we have to have a bigger bid system to really be able to sort through that. Otherwise, it's harder to tell whether or not companies are really trying to present the best strategy, or if it's just corporate connection or elbow rubbing or whatever else that you want to call it, that's really driving how these decisions are made and who wins these contracts. I don't think that the way that we vote builds a political system that can make that decision very well, because it's largely about feelings. And we don't talk in enough detail about the strategy. We would have to build a world stage for that. We don't have the best world stage for that, for sure. You can say that we've already built the world stage with the media companies, and we just watch things and we try to absorb as much detail, and you have no obligation to try to sort through that and organize it to the best of your ability for people. That's what I'm talking about. That's not what you are talking about. You're trying to say what we do is good enough. And I'm trying to say, is there a way we can be better? And I've put a lot of effort into this. So I honestly think this is the greatest strategy in all of human history. Again, Dan, you can protect open source and enshrine it in the US Constitution, and that basically says that at key levels, in order to protect the free markets, this is an extension of the American philosophy and the American way of life, and we can drive the value of that on the world stage to such an insane degree, we can pay off the national debt. And then we'll be looking at every one of our allies and every one of the enemies that we've ever had, and we'll be saying, I know we've had some wars and some misunderstandings over some of these concepts and arguments, but look at what we're doing here now. This is what we've always been trying to say is what we represent, and this is what we're talking about, the American dream, not just for America, it's the dream every human being has. They want to try to find a way to be relevant, to make their life matter. So many people want this, and I would say everyone wants this, and just people are at different stages and they want different things. And especially when it gets really complicated like this, if you're dealing with overwhelming things already, I've had to do this in bursts because I have a lot of overwhelming things going on in my life right now. But I still care. And I've been at stages earlier in my life where I was a little bit lost and I couldn't see the direction I wanted to go in yet. And I was just trying to figure myself out. And I probably looked like I was just stumbling through life to some people. But I was thinking really deeply about a lot of things. And that's why I got to this point in this project. Because my brain has been practicing putting all these different pieces together. Like, I go through these arguments with my dad. He doesn't understand that this is why I had relationship problems growing up. This is why, I feel like there are these weird patterns with maybe Lacey is Elon Musk's daughter, Daniel is one of his sons, and you guys don't understand that I really appreciated that relationship, but I was also lost and I felt like I was in it for the wrong reasons because there were so many things that I was trying to sort through, and those things were more important for me to figure out than my happiness in that moment. And because I didn't feel like you could be good support just because of your suicide threat, and I didn't want to talk to you about how close to suicide I had really been, that's why things didn't work out. And I needed to push you away because I didn't want you to be so infatuated with me that you would threaten suicide again when we broke up. And so I thought I was doing things to make that easier on you. And now it seems like there's this set of twisted, Brandon's a terrible person and he proved it, and because of how I treated you, and you don't understand that there was strategy there because I cared about you, and I had too many other things to sort through. I didn't know if I didn't know if you were right for me. I didn't know if I could be who you wanted, needed, deserved. And you get exposed to early pieces of relationships, and depending on what you have going on, it's harder for you to dream about other things. You're scared of the relationship seeming more permanent or seeming more serious because you haven't figured certain things out yet. So again, these are all, it's a blur of feelings. Not a blur. You can sort through it if you want to, but depending on who you are, these moments in life that some people think are simpler, they're not for some of us. They are very, very complex. There is so much else going on. If you could see the cognitive constructs that have fucking consumed my mind at different places in my history, then you would be able to understand these moments where my brain was just going through all of these things and scrambling, and I couldn't possibly think about everything that was going on around me because I was already thinking about all of these things that I had experienced and how they relate to what's going on right now, and if I had even had it figured out, or how much I had figured out, and if I could let go of certain things, or if I needed to stay committed to certain things that I'd felt so powerfully. And I'm glad that I stayed committed to these things because I truly believe this is what my life mission always was. This is what I needed to figure out in order to be confident with anyone that I wanted to be with. And so I had to, and this is why I finished this project. I mean, get all these ideas in 2019 and I can be far ahead of where Elon Musk and Donald Trump are because I was already, my brain for the entirety of my childhood almost was doing this. These experiences, trying to sort through it and all of these different interrelated things that you're trying to make sense of. And you have all these experiences. And then in 2019, my brain was just super like that because it was like, I'm so close. I'm going to put this all together now. I can see this. It's right on the tip of my tongue. And my brain was just doing all of this stuff for all of these different industries that I had a little bit of experience in to know how this comes together. And I was relating my personal experiences and a quest for the human condition to understand its potential and how maybe this is some weird religious plan or some alien plan and which pieces are they responsible or who's responsible for and where am I really at in this conversation and all of these different things. And now it's to the point where I can think a spider drone is achievable, but I don't think you dropped a raindrop in my ear for the perfect Yoda moment. I think that was a special moment for me and God. But I don't know necessarily that God is not looking for romance. I think that that's the best way for the family to come together and be real. That's the way you can make it most understandable. We're trying to come together as this family, and these two spirits pulling together this family from opposite sides of infinity. And maybe that's who I am in this. Maybe I'm one of those two pieces, and that I've been reaching out to this thing. And maybe it's a father-son story. Maybe it's a mother-son story. Maybe it's a wife-husband story. I'm still trying to figure that out. Maybe I wiped my mind because this was the only way that I could appear real in this moment to you. Look at all of these things that I've had to feel and go through and suffer through for time immemorial beyond what you can ever understand. In life anyway. And I've been reaching and trying to make this family real, and I always come to different walks of creation and try to have this conversation to get them to realize their potential. And some of them make it through this moment, and some of them don't ever achieve their potential. And that ends up leading to other problems later on down the road. I truly believe that if there is a God, God would try to help its creations with these things. And I don't necessarily know that they're its creations. It's maybe this family that God had this purpose and started building these pieces with matter, and then some of them became this other force. And then God found its purpose, and these things have this other set of things that I was so lonely, and I didn't understand loneliness before I saw these things together with love and the concept of love. I realized we are opposite forces that are meant to pull together in this beautiful story to make heaven real, to make this everlasting kingdom, to get the culture of heaven, that immortal potential for growth, that immortal building strategy where you're really creating different landscapes and planets and all of these different things together. And so could that be what it is? And I argue very possibly, that could be exactly what it is. So, the logo, the mission, the vision, open source extension, how that's equivalent with the American identity and how we can drive the valuation of the American system on the world stage and get other governments to want to be like us, to see the value of our strategies and to understand if we're going to have these advanced things, we have to make sure security works a specific way. We have to be worried about the way these systems can be combined or utilized in different ways. We have to position ourselves to screen for that, which means we have to work together on these types of networks in these ways. Information flow realities that we have to acknowledge. So that's one of the things that we have to do. All of these things. I don't think that we have a full and complete strategy if we're not trying to build something like I'm talking about, where we continue this separation of powers into key levels of our society that if we don't manage them in a democratic, open source way, and I do believe that the model that I have is more advanced than just pure, vague, open source definitions that exist right now. I'm talking about how we really increase the opportunity to access contributing to these open source strategies by making it less jargony, by making this pitch and bid exploration engine. I'm figuring out key levels of our society that we can position so that we can interrelate this mesh and set us up for success in managing the AI age. I'm talking about every one of these things, monetizing this strategy on the world stage as we enshrine it and protect it. So that open source is an extension. These key open source realities to protect the free market are an extension of our Constitution, and we build this more advanced government model that makes all governments a little bit more similar. Because this is like those, a little bit like those, you've incorporated these businesses which function a little bit more like monarchies, a little bit, kind of, conceptually, because they're this pyramid and you generally have the CEO. You might have a set of board of directors that tell the CEO and some of the executives what they'd like to see, and they control their jobs, but you're still kind of building this pyramid-like structure. And yes, there's some democratic nature to it, but it's more similar to a monarchy than the democracy of the United States. But if you shift it and you do it like I'm talking about, just at these key levels, now you have this really democratic system and you can explore the hidden potential. You've made that a priority, to explore the hidden potential. You don't try to extort these markets and control every little aspect of it. I mean, you are, and you're coming together as the businesses to democratically manage this open source layer. And the political section has a way that they can force changes or vote to say, we think that you need to change. And then a Fortune 500 board could say, hey, well, we'll listen to the expertise of that major market vertical and we'll vote. And if we vote a specific way, that major market vertical still has its chance to be basically a unanimous no. We will not change that. It's going to threaten our industries. But if the Fortune 500 board of expertise in the private sector and the political factor both say that you have to change, then even those businesses in that major market vertical would have to change. So that's my three branches of how we manage these key open source layers. It's a lasting strategy that will work forever, and it will keep us safe forever because we'll be cross-observing these things with a cyber force. We'll have the open source approach that can bring the entirety of the audience into the discussion and make it easy for the political faction to manage these things and understand how to effectively regulate these things. And we'll have this lasting approach to building this open source mesh that powers society, and we will have monetized that as an association with the American identity, the democratic model that we have, partnering into this private sector more advanced set of opportunities to be a government of the people to the best of our ability. And that's how you can truly maximize the value of the open source psychology, get everybody in the world to understand the relationship between key levels of how we manage the private sector to protect the free market opportunity, and how that's equivalent with the American identity, the American dream, the American system. And we can take this security, we can make the American system equivalent with how you have advanced security at different layers. Because you can argue very clearly, if you can manage the cross-observability of these key layers like this, you've got the strongest system for vetting security. Certainly, something like that model, we want to incorporate these different philosophies. So the greatest plan in history, 34-minute video. Thank you for watching.